So, how excited we are at Heal Thyself to partner with Ned. And Ned is a high quality, when I mean high quality, the highest quality CBD company, hemp company you're going to find. They utilize full spectrum hemp, which means that it contains all of the cannabinoids, not just the isolate CBD, which means all the cannabinoids are going to target different parts of your system. And quality. It's extracted from organically grown hemp plants in Paonia, Colorado, and it has zero isolates or synthetic ingredients. The company is so committed to transparency that you can go on their website and look at their certificates of authenticity, their third party tests for all of their ingredients across the board, everything you see in there, not just the CBD hemp. So, a recent study showed that the majority of products in the industry contain potentially dangerous ingredients. And that's a beautiful thing about Ned, because not only they're transparent, but they're also high quality, efficacious products that you want to be using all the time. So for me, I started using this for sleep and certainly it helped. We saw that across the board with my sleep numbers on my Aura Ring. But what I saw after a minor surgery that I had was that it was a potent anti-inflammatory, such that my cuts, my bruises, bleeding, wounds, and healing were much, much better than if I didn't take that. So as a give back, to the Heal Thyself listener, you're going to receive 15% off your first purchase or 20% off of your first membership purchase. Now, memberships are amazing. They offer great, great perks. You're going to get 15% off of every purchase as a member. So go to helloned.com/DRG and enter the code DRG at checkout. That's HELLONED.com/DRG. You're going to get 15% off of your first one-time order or 20% off of your first subscription order plus free shipping. So happy to be partnering with Aura Organic, one of my favorite companies. You heard me talk about it for quite a while. It's been about 2 years that they've been on my stories. So super excited to have them as a sponsor on the show because it's a company I believe in. It's a plant-based organic nutrition company. It's got everything from protein powder, skin and hair and nail supplements, pre-workouts. It's an amazing line, but I want to tell you about their Easy Being Green Powder. This is a green powder that I put in my smoothies every morning. It's certified organic, it's vegan, and it's a really good way, especially for someone like me who's running around, going to the studio, back home, moving around Los Angeles, where I can make sure that I'm getting my daily greens. Now, we know that all the colors of the rainbow are important, but leafy greens are really, really nutrient dense, and we need those antioxidants and micronutrients in our body. So Easy Being Green has something called Triphalia, which is a great herbal formula, which means 3 fruits. And it adds from the antioxidant load that you're getting from the greens already. And it's also going to be helping with overall digestion. So if you open my pantry, you're going to see the protein powder I use, the green powder I use, the collagen that I use, the pre-workout that I use, and it's all going to be Aura Organics. It's one of my favorite brands across the board. You can find Aura Organic at Ulta, Whole Foods, and the Vitamin Shop. But you can also go online at www.ora.organic, ORGANIC, and you're going to use the code Heal Thyself at checkout. That's HEALTHYSELF, and you're going to get 10% off of your next purchase. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Heal Thyself. What a jam-packed show we have today, from Knowledge Bomb to product review, and we have a special guest. In today's Knowledge Bomb, I'm going to talk about dairy industry, alternative milk industry, and going into that product review, we're going to go into oat milks. And if you remember, back in around June or July 2019, I did an oat milk review, and there was only a handful of oat milks out there. Now, it almost tripled, and now we're going to find out which one of the best oat milks and what to look for yourself when shopping for oat milks. Guess what? We also have a special guest, and we're going to talk about mold. Mold is one of the most important issues out there in human health, and I promise you it's going to be the new kale or the new gut health. And what we're learning is that even if you don't appear to have water damage anywhere, or know that you have water damage anywhere, your family could still be affected by mold. We're going to learn about where to find mold, how to look for mold, and how it's affecting us from one of the foremost mold experts in the country. So without further ado, let's get to this show and go into the Knowledge Bomb. All right, oat milk. I'm so excited to talk about oat milk because it is so hot. It is the alternative milk. It actually has bumped up to the #2 most popular plant-based milk knocking out soy, and only right behind almond milk. And as I mentioned, I did a review back in summer 2019. And look, I apologize that I didn't do it last year, but now the oat milk industry has exploded. Last year or 2 years ago, we did 5 to 6 brands. Now we're going to go over 15 today. But let's get a quick background on oat milk so we know what we're working with. Spins, reported by Food Navigator, reports that oat milk sales represent a total of 213 million in the 52 weeks before September 6th. That's an increase of 350.8% from a year ago for refrigerated varieties and 106% over a year ago for shelf-stable products. So oat milk exploded last year, particularly in the latter half. Plant-based milks have been steadily growing, and they represent actually 14% of the milk category in the last year. And this is according to the Plant-Based Food Association. Dairy sales pretty much have plateaued though. And you see all these desperate attempts by the dairy industry, from commercials to billboards to attempting to even sue plant-based companies for using the word milk. But the health consciousness of this generation is vastly more educated than that of our parents when it comes to health, food, and lifestyle, right? So we have the blessing of something like social media to teach us where we can learn a lot and we can learn it fast. So when it comes to this fluid, right, from a pregnant cow, the myth is that milk is needed for strong bones. That goes out the window. The myth is that kids need milk to grow and thrive. That goes out the window. And yes, it has good fats, fat-soluble vitamins, protein, but it also has antibiotics, especially in the conventional brands. And as if we're not overprescribed these as it is, and it's wreaking havoc on our gut bacteria, you check and see your child's digestive complaints or skin conditions if they're improving once you remove them off of dairy. And if you're an adult suffering with acne, or your dermatologist has not mentioned diet or dairy, then it's time to move on from that dermatologist. One of the main exogenous sources of estrogen for humans, right, as if we're not inundated with plastic, is from dairy. So now we're understanding that milk, the conventional one in particular, has an inflammatory profile, especially it's coming from grain-fed cows, but it also has inflammatory proteins overall. It's high in saturated fat, and yes, that can be a problem for many. Saturated fat is not okay for everyone. And if that wasn't enough, environmental toxins. Whatever the cows are exposed to, which is independent of USDA Organic or grass-fed or whatever, is going into the milk, and we're exposed to it. We're blessed to have access to so much better quality of fats or proteins or vitamins that the only place milk should be is in a pregnant cow's udder. So let's move on to a healthier life. It's not the 1900s, and it's certainly not the 90s Got Milk campaign. The milk industry is dying as we are getting more educated. And to end this knowledge segment, I'll say this. One of my favorite quotes ever. You're not lactose intolerant, you're just not a baby cow. What an amazing quote. All right, let's move on to this product review so we can find out what are the best alternative milks out there when it comes to oat milk. All right, now you know how I feel about dairy and cow's milk. Let's talk about oat milk. And you know how I am about quality. And when a market is growing, like in oat milk, so too is opportunity. And when opportunity arises, businesses are looking for high net profits, right? This is business 101. But also what we're seeing is a lot of reduction in quality and the ingredients that are used to cut cost. So let me say this, not all oat milks are created equal. As always, we'll give companies ample time to respond, and we'll have multiple points of contact with multiple attempts, and everything's on record. And shout out to my awesome assistant, Melissa, for doing that. And summer 2021, that's how we're coming. All business, everything's on record, and we're making sure that we are standing by everyone so we know what the best is out there. So here are some of the most important questions to be asked, and what we ask the oat milk companies. Is the product USDA organic? This is so, I can't be understated, so important. The oats can be one of the most overconsumed toxic foods. Glyphosate is used regularly as a drying agent or a desiccant. You already know about glyphosate. We talked about it. We talked about Monsanto hiding how it destroys our healthy cells, how it destroys our gut bacteria, and it has a known mechanism to cause cancer. We know it's already a foregone conclusion. We know how glyphosate works in the body and what it's doing. That's not the only pesticide. Oats have also other harmful pesticides, paraquat being one of them. It's a chemical toxic to the nervous system and connected to Parkinson's. Oatmeal and oat milk tend to be consumed every day as everyday foods, right? So what we want to do is make sure we're choosing the best, especially if we're consuming it and being exposed to it all the time. So we asked them if they have the USDA Organic label, and if they don't, are they looking to have one in the future, or are their products organically sourced? It's important because not all brands can really afford USDA organic labels, especially the early startups. But we want to find out how are they sourcing and if they have plans in the future. Also, what a lot of people are not talking about in oat milks is phosphates, and that's utilized as a foaming agent. Especially as a barista brand in the barista line, a lot of these coffees that we're getting or lattes are really foamy. And then you go, why can't I make that at home? Well, you can, you can use a foamer, an at-home foamer. But when you get it at the cafe, they usually have phosphates in the oat milk. And it's very important because phosphates are not safe for everyone, particularly if you have kidney disease, a family history of kidney disease, or any kidney issues. And lastly, the question was, do you use any inflammatory oils like canola, safflower, or sunflower oil? And we just want to keep in mind as we go through these, you're going to see that a lot of these companies use either canola oil or sunflower oil. Not a lot of them use safflower oil. When it comes to sunflower oil, there's actually 4 different kinds of sunflower oil, and they're not all created equal. There's the typical high linolenic sunflower oils or high oleic oils. They can be used, ones that are high in monosaturated fats rather than polysaturated fats, some that are high in inflammatory omega-6, some that are lower. So it's important to know that if some of the companies that use sunflower oil, we want to ask the type of oil that they're using and how much of it. Okay, so, and lastly, if they use that oil, they're planning to use a substitute in the future. So those are the questions we asked. Let's go over the results. 2 companies never responded at all, Happy Planet and Pacific Foods. They had over 5 inquiries. We couldn't get in touch with them. All right, let's get into one of my favorite ones right from the get-go. And when I say my favorite ones, not my favorite to buy, but my favorite to talk about because they need to be doing better. Oatly is in the same boat as 2019. Their tagline is, it's like milk, but made for humans. What I say, it's more like oat milk and borderline crap for humans. It has misleading nutrition facts, more sugar than it's leading on, right? It has a no added sugar, but it utilizes an enzymatic process to create milk from oats, and water breaks down the oat starch and creates simple sugars, primarily glucose and maltose. But you're gonna see 7 grams of sugar per cup, but taste it. And tell me if that tastes like 7 grams of sugar per cup. I do believe there's hidden sugars in there. It removes fiber. It has lower protein than soy milk, okay. Now they say they use a small amount of rapeseed oil. Pay attention, that's canola oil. But they say it's non-GMO, great. They say it's expeller pressed canola rapeseed oil in the milk, and it achieves a desired nutritional fat content and texture for the product. And they add a minimally processed blend of coconut and non-GMO canola and rapeseed oil to the frozen product for the same reason. Traditionally, canola oil is super processed and utilizes a chemical called hexane to create it. Now, the nice thing about Oatly is they don't use it. The downside is that non-GMO product tells me nothing about the quality, right? And this is what I had, the issue that I had with Oatly from the get-go is, what does that mean to me though? Because it means that there's no pesticides, herbicides, chemicals, fertilizers, right? And there's no guarantee that there's no spraying of the oats that are used in Oatly. And I had this phone conversation with the higher ups 2 years ago. And they told me, all right, no worries, Dr. G, because we're detox project certified. That means we don't use glyphosate at all. And I go, okay, well, how are you going to tell us in the public that you don't? Well, we're going to put it on the bottle. 2 years later, I have yet to see a detox project certified label on the bottle. It's not USDA organic, so there's not much security that I see in what Oatly oat milk is. Some of the positives, it has vitamin D, B12, B2, vitamin A, but again, nothing about where these vitamins are sourced from other than they're just vegan. So Oatly is one of the first, but certainly far from the best. Other ones to avoid, Simple Truth by Kroger, does not use an organic label, has a little non-GMO label, but I've never seen that. The agent on the phone said that they use a USDA organic label. I didn't see that. It has sunflower oil and gum, so if you're using it, make sure to pay attention if you have any digestive distress or skin changes or anything like that. Probably the worst of all would be Silk. It's not organic, not organically sourced, not planning on going organic, utilizes phosphates, uses sunflower oil, and not planning on removing it. Just move on from Silk if you're using it to the better quality ones that I'm going to talk about. Leafa Farms, not organic, no plans to convert it, does not use phosphate, uses sunflower oil. Better than Silk because the sunflower oil it uses is a much better quality one, but still there's better ones out there that I'm going to talk about. Here are the better tier milks than the ones I just mentioned. It's a step up from the aforementioned. Malibu milk can do a little bit better, but it's pretty good. It has a USDA Organic label. It's an oat and flax mix, actually. It uses organic sunflower oil and organic gums. So if you're really into utilizing an oat and flax mix, then this is the one for you. Just make sure you pay attention how your body reacts to the gums and the sunflower oil. Next one, second tier one, Forager. This is USDA Organic, does not use phosphates. The oat milk has some canola oil, which I'm not a fan of, just like the Oatly one. The reason why this one's better than Oatly is because it has a USDA Organic label. And I think they can improve the formula, but like Malibu Milk, they're on this second tier. The last one of this second tier is Rise. Their products are USDA Organic. They do not use any phosphates. They use some organic sunflower oil in their oat milks. They utilize it because it's for taste and texture. It's unrefined and cold pressed. So the second tier were Rise, Forager, and Malibu Milk. And here are the top tier oat milks. If you are a fan of oat milk, I would highly suggest and urge you to move on to a better quality one, and here are the best. Same as a few years ago, I spoke about milk, and it stays at the top or one of the top. It's USDA Organic. All of the raw materials are organically sourced, and the finished goods are certified organic. That's how you got to do it. No phosphates, no foaming agents utilized in this formulation. Does not use canola, safflower, or sunflower oil. Nothing to stabilize. It is a very, very clean oat milk, and you know this because when you open it, you better be drinking it quick because it's going to go bad. That's how good quality it is, right? Nothing should be in your refrigerator or on your shelf for that long. What's another top oat milk? I really like the Three Trees one. It's an USDA Organic oat milk. Does not use phosphates, no canola, safflower, sunflower oil. They have filtered water. They have gluten-free oats for all of the folks who are really sensitive to gluten. Oats can be a major source or a hidden source. It uses some sunflower seeds, organic. Another one of my favorite ones, one of the top, is the Willa's oat milk. It's a new one, and it's USDA Organic. It's organically sourced, and they'll provide proof for it. They do not use any phosphates, no canola, safflower. They use any phosphates or foaming agents? No, they do not. In the unsweetened original, there's 0 oils. In the Willa's Creamy, they have a touch of organic, non-GMO, high oleic sunflower oil. Remember, I talked about the 4 different types of oil. This was a better quality one with a better monosaturated profile. And the last of the best is Good Milk. It's not currently USDA Organic, but they are working on getting it by next year. But they're happy to send any organic certifications on all the ingredients. So basically it's an organic product, but they just have yet to have the label. They do not use any phosphates in their product for sure. And they do not use any canola, sunflower, or safflower oil. The difference about Good Milk is frozen. So you would have to thaw it, and they give you a nice little glass, and you can leave it in your refrigerator. And just like all of these high quality milks that were on the best of the best list that I just read to you, these don't last too long. If you're opening it, make sure you're using it pretty fast for you and your family. And that's how it should be. Any of these really high quality milks do not have a long shelf life. All right, everyone. Today's special guest, Brian Karr. He is the co-founder of We Inspect and the host of Mold Finders Radio. He is so passionate about mold, and something that I brought up in one of my first shows and something I've suffered with personally. Now we get to talk to the expert about mold in the home. Welcome to the show, brother.
Awesome. Thank you, man. I'm super pumped to be here. I've been posting stories today.
Yeah.
And it's been like a lead up of where am I? Like I'm going to do this thing and I didn't say where I was going. But I was like saying, it's like, this is one of like when I first started my podcast, which was about a year ago or so, it's like, I want to get on Dr. G's podcast. Like it was a goal for me to like be visible enough and make a big enough impact, hopefully, to be able to be on a platform like this. So I'm just super pumped that you're
awesome, man. Awesome. And I'm glad to have you here because the work you're doing is so important. I talked to you a little bit about how I suffered from mold about 3 years ago, moving into a place which seemingly on the surface looked great. Why? Because it had new kitchen counter, completely new renovated living room. The floors were brand new. I was like, whoa, this place can't be moldy, right?
Right.
And then lo and behold, I'm there for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and I'm getting more and more sick, like cognitively. Like my memory's poor. I'm getting headaches. I'm getting this dissociative feeling like nothing's real, like it's a dream. All these symptoms, urination at night, nonstop. And then we have actually someone close to you came and then checked, and then they found black mold
Yeah.
all over the place. How common is that? A place that we think is brand new, there's mold in the leaking in the back or somewhere.
It's super common. Yeah, I think like most mold is hidden, right? So like was your place, was it a brand new build or it was just a new place that you went into that was
It was
renovated?
just a new place renovated.
Right. And so that's the thing. So like a building, a home, it has a history of however long it's been built, right? And so if there was previous leaks behind kitchen sinks and bathrooms or whatever, when they're renovating a house, that's why I always say like renovated houses they're so dangerous if you don't really understand like how to go in there and screen it properly, know what you're looking for. Because if you just look on the surface, everything looks fine.
Yeah.
And you think everything's great. And your story is like, I have so many people with similar stories where it's like, I moved into my place a month ago, 3 months ago, a few weeks, all of a sudden we're starting this cascade of symptoms that are going on. It's super common. And in renovations, the challenge with renovations is that if you remove the walls, if you remove the cabinets and you put all the new stuff in and paint it and everything looks great, then all of the like visual cues that we use to try to go through and figure out if there's historical damage that could be persistent there, it's all gone. It's like water on the beach washing away footprints, like that's what happens. It makes it so difficult in situations like that.
I can imagine, because then you're trying to do your job and go, is there mold here? Where was it? Where's like the issue? And brand new renovations are going to cover everything up, just like it did with my place.
Yeah, and it's not even that there's water damage right now. It's not even that there's moisture right now. So you can't, like a lot of people think, I'll just use an infrared camera or I'll use a moisture reader. Like that stuff is most likely going to show nothing in a situation like that because it was an old problem. Leaks probably been fixed. You took out anything that might have been wet at the time, replaces. So like all that stuff is gone.
So it's not often you meet people who are just passionate about mold, okay? But you have like quite the story. So how did you find yourself working in mold day to day?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I didn't like wake up when I was like 13 and like, I want to be a mold guy when I grow up. Like nobody does that. No, but like I had a really similar experience, not exactly like yours, but there was an event that triggered something in my apartment that I lived in. And within a couple of weeks, I started seeing symptoms, right? So it's funny because like people could be symptomatic relatively quickly after a new exposure, or sometimes it takes people longer for whatever reason, depending on how their immune system is working and whatever's going on. But I was living in an apartment, West Hollywood, super overpriced, super old, and probably not in great shape, which I found out later. But anyways, I was on my bed and I worked at an ad agency at the time, and I wasn't like super thrilled with it there. Like I'd actually been offered a promotion to be the youngest VP in company's history. And I just wasn't very fulfilled doing it. I was like, man, if I take this, then like this is my life now. Like this is kind of that fork in the road moment for me. And so I turned it down. And then I got laid off a week later, conveniently. So I'm sitting here with like no job. And I start like searching on the computer, like jobs that'll make me feel fulfilled. I'm trying to figure out like what I'm gonna do. Guys, if you go to like Monster and do that, nothing comes up. There's like nothing that's there. But anyway, so I'm sitting on my bed, I'm doing that, and all of a sudden, like this drip starts dripping out of the ceiling in my room. And it escalates pretty quickly. The stains, I look up, the stain starts spreading. All of a sudden, like my ceiling kind of collapses in, and there's a water issue. There was a pipe up above me that broke from the bathroom above, caused a big thing. I called the landlord, like, oh my God, water, damn, somebody come fix this, right? Because that's what most of us would do. And you need to stop the moisture. But the problem is, we think that once they came in, fixed the pipe, and like patched up the ceiling, that everything is fine. And then they're like, yeah, everything's cool. There's no problems, And a couple weeks after that, I start noticing cognitive type of symptoms. A few weeks after that, I start noticing like skin sort of like eczema style types of things going on my skin. I just like got really freaked out. And my wife now, who I was dating at the time, her dad is who you just referred to earlier. Her dad is Mark Levy, who's my father-in-law. And he, he came out and he looks around. He's like, there's a lot of problems here, right? And this was after the landlord brought their own guy out who did like an air sample in the middle of the room and said everything was fine. That guy's there for 20 minutes. Mark's at my 800 square foot apartment for like 3 hours going through the whole house, finds like 8 things, all these problems. So I kind of I saw both sides of it. I see, okay, this is what most people do. They just call someone in, they kind of want to cover it up, take a quick sample that really is not the appropriate way to use that type of test in the first place, which I learned later, but I wouldn't have known that at the time, right? And then you have somebody like Mark comes in who ends up training me and realized this is actually how you figure out what's going on in houses. And I saw such a big difference. And I think back, I'm like, oh man, like like this is something that I feel like is actually helping people. This job didn't come up on Monster when I was searching it, but then I ask him, I'm like, hey, can I work? I want to work with you, like right on the spot. I ask him, and he's like, I'd only been dating his daughter for not that long at the time. I was basically putting all my chips in that I thought that I was going to marry my wife, which I kind of felt like was going to happen. I'm going to work with her dad like that early. It was crazy, but it was just such an interesting opportunity for me. I couldn't pass it up.
Wow. Super excited to be supported by Purity Coffee on Heal Thyself. Purity Coffee, back 2 years ago when I first started this show, I was looking for the best coffee. And what I found from my colleagues and research and everything across the board and my own vetting for companies was that Purity Coffee kept coming up over and over and over. And I actually was at a conference one time at the A4M conference 2 years ago in Las Vegas, and I actually talked to the whole crew at Purity Coffee, their booth, and we had such a deep conversation about the quality of coffee. So if you drink coffee, right? Quality is so important. Now, Purity Coffee is a top 1% coffee in the world, and it's considered a specialty grade organic, pesticide-free, mold and mycotoxin-free, all adulterants in coffee that you can be having every single morning or multiple times a day. So some of you may know, I myself am not a coffee drinker. I'm particularly sensitive to it, but this is the coffee that I recommend to anyone who's a coffee drinker and who goes, hey, Dr. G, I'm looking for a high quality coffee. The beans in itself are hand-picked, quality checked at the farm to ensure the highest quality and antioxidants. So on average, Purity Coffee is gonna have 65% more antioxidants than any other organic coffee brand out there. It's amazing stuff. So drinking healthier coffee, it's one of the easiest things you can do, right? It's going to boost longevity, cardiac health. The reason why so many coffees are villainized is because of the quality. And now you're getting the top quality coffee out there in Purity. So go to puritycoffee.com. You're going to get free shipping on orders over $50. And when you saw that drip coming down and then weeks later, what were some of the symptoms? You had the eczema, but was it on your face? Was it throughout your body? Just so people listening, they can go, wait a minute, like I've been suffering some of these same symptoms.
It was on my face, and I still get flare-ups now to this day because now, fast forward 8 or 9 years, however long it's been, I've been in so many like bad moldy houses that I think my body actually thought that I lived in a bad moldy house just because I've been in so many of them. So for me, it kind of flares up like around my nose, kind of around my mouth area. But I was washing my face one morning and I saw it. And I was like, what is this flaky, like red stuff all over my face? And prior to that, I was having just some kind of cognitive stuff. Like I'm usually really sharp and kind of on top of it. And it's like taking me longer to think of stuff and like different things like that. I'm like, stuff like that's kind of scary. Like you don't see that. And so it makes it hard for other people to understand kind of what you're going through. But like, your body and you're like, man, I can't think of something like a word escapes you. That's honestly like those sort of cognitive things are like one of my biggest like fears in life down the road. Like I don't want that to happen, which is why I do so much preventative stuff now to help prevent that. Cause it's like one thing I don't want to happen.
Yeah. And you're in there. And I know exactly that to look for words that but they're just not there.
Yeah.
It's kind of scary.
It is scary.
And my first few podcasts, I was still moldy brained. And I was like, you can hear me kind of stutter sometimes because I couldn't find words. But how long did it take for you to start feeling better?
It was really quick for me. Once I got out, I was in pretty good shape.
Yeah.
I talked to Dr. Jill Krista a good amount. We're friends, but she wrote the book Break the Mold, and so I was talking to her. I think maybe on my podcast one day or another conversation, and she had referenced a study, and I don't know exactly. I don't want to like misquote it, but basically she was saying there was like a population of people that were showing mold symptoms in an office building. There was some problem in the office building. They just moved them to a different space, and half of them just got better. So there's a chunk of people where if you just get out of it, you'll bounce back pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And then there's a chunk of people that have other things that are underlying that going on that makes it more difficult.
Yeah, it took me quite a while. It took me like 3 to 6 months to finally, I had to be out of it, like completely. And unfortunately, especially here in LA, the closer you get to the beach, there's more issues with these houses. So I had to find a place that like breathing it in and seeing how I felt, and it actually worked out. Yeah. So you say you've seen so many homes with so many different types of mold, the presentations of mold. For the viewers and listeners, right? what are some of the things we can do right now? Like even listening on the show, where can we check in our home where mold really is commonly living?
Yeah, I mean, you think mold needs three things to grow. It needs a food source. Our whole house is basically a food source, so we can't do anything about that. It needs the right temperature, which is what we live at. There's not much we could do there. So the third thing that it needs is water. And so you got to think of it, just think of mold like a seed that's getting watered and it's growing. Like just think of it that way. And you say, okay, if I understand that water is the enemy, basically, where is the water in the house? Like the first thing you do is think of where there's more water flowing and moving, right? Sinks, toilets, showers, bathrooms, like those types of areas. You're going to more likely find things in those areas. I'd say the easiest, most common thing, every single house I go into, almost every single one, there is at least one sink cabinet somewhere that has a mold problem in it. Every one. And it's like something super easy you can look at. But here's the thing is that like people think that you're looking for mold, right? And you're not. Like the secret to this is that you're not actually looking for mold. You're looking for water damage because you can't see mold. And by the time you're seeing it, it's already bad. But you can see water damage. And water damage doesn't have to be big, massive stains and things like that. It's actually understanding what those signs of water damage are so you can look at those. And it's almost like once you understand what they look like, it's almost like you look at a wall and you see like a little bubbling in the paint and it's like this big red flag that's like, hey, there's a pretty good chance there's mold back here, behind here. We need to know if that's happening. And that's kind of how we go through a house. But if you're listening, pull everything out of every sink cabinet, pull all your stuff out. We always shove so many things under our sink cabinets because it's like, it's an easy place to put it. We'll put it here. What it does a couple things. It doesn't let you see under there anymore. So if you ever do open it up, your sight line is so blocked that you wouldn't even see if there was water stains or damage or anything like that. And then the second thing that it does is that it creates like the more stuff you have in there, the less airflow moves through there. It like traps air more easily. And so if there is a moisture problem in there, there's more places for it to get kind of caught up and trapped, and that's where you get mold problems. So if nothing else, you go through your whole house literally right now while you're listening, pick up your phone, stick your headphones in and start walking around and pull everything out of your sinks. And if you see anything that's like warping wood, staining, discoloration, bubbling, chipping, anything like that, even if it's product stains, those are red flags. And the product stain thing is funny because people are like, it's just products. Like, so I like the perfect thing happened to me, which just like totally debunks this. But like my wife one day bought like a spray mold tile cleaner thing for bathrooms, right? And I didn't even know she bought it. It was in the back of our kitchen cabinet for who knows how long under the sink. One day I needed something in the back. I pull it out. That bottle had exploded or overflowed or something. And I was like, oh, geez. There was mold growing all around it. It was literally a mold cleaning product.
Wow.
And there was mold growing all over the cabinet and the wall and everything. Like this just shows us like products, their base is water. Like that's the base of everything. And so it could cause problems.
Whoa. To think about that, right? And we buy that for that specifically. And it's just wild that you find that. And so then you mentioned bathrooms, man, but like there's been toilets that overflood, right? Let's say people are in the bath that overfloods, or showers, they like there's some seeping out and it goes into the floor. For people who are listening now, does that mean every single time we go to the bathroom and there's some, or let's say condensation even when we're taking a hot steamy shower, are these all big problems now?
I mean, they can be, big is relative, I guess. They all can be problems. It depends. Like think of your car, right? If you're driving your car and your check engine light comes on, oh man, I should go check this thing out. Like there's something that told me that there could be something wrong here. I need to go check it out. Our house doesn't come with check engine lights. It makes it like a little more difficult.
Right.
But if you think of my tub overflowed, my toilet overflowed, those are check engine lights for the house. And so you don't just think, oh, I'm just going to like clean this up. Like if that happened in your car, you wouldn't just, I guess you like push your gas pedal a certain number of times and do something fancy and the light turns off, right? You don't just do that. You take it in, you get it looked at to make sure there's nothing going on. We need to adopt that same type of how we take care of our car versus how we take care of our house mentality. Like that has to happen because when you get your car, is it like when I got my car as a kid, my dad's like, listen, if you don't fill up this oil every 3,000 miles, your car is going to literally explode. So you know what I did? I definitely made sure that I was taking my car in and getting it checked out. No one tells their kids or whatever when they buy a house, like, listen, so when you buy your house, you need to make sure you're doing X, Y, and Z. Otherwise, it's going to turn into this toxic death trap. Like nobody tells you that.
Right.
And so these things, if a tub overflows, if you're catching it super quick, it's one thing, right? It overflowed. My daughter's in the tub and she splashes water
Right, right,
everywhere.
right,
If I
right.
wipe it all up like within a minute or a couple minutes, it's not a big deal. If your tub overflows, it's a significant amount of water. It takes you some time. We're not talking like days. Like maybe it takes you a half hour or an hour or something to get that out. That could seep under the floor. It could seep into the walls at that point.
Hmm.
Acting quick is really important. If you don't, then you need to think of those as like, okay, something happened. I need to at least check and make sure that didn't cause a bigger problem.
Yeah, which makes sense. So we can tend to it as fast as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned the way that conventionally, like landlords have someone like repair water damage. Are you saying that it's falling short of what should be happening?
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Totally. You think of the mindset, like if you're renting, you think of the mindset of your landlord, right? Think of what they're doing. They probably own multiple buildings. They own the buildings for the purpose of making money. They're not. Nobody's buying buildings for the purpose of creating healthy housing for people. Like no one's doing that, right? So they buy this building. Their purpose is on building out a portfolio, on getting monthly income coming in. The way that they typically look at it is they look at their revenue per door or their profit per door that they have. So they have an apartment building with 10 units. They evaluate the building. The only reason I know this is because I went through training to start doing this. But you evaluate the building, whether it's even a good thing to purchase, and then how it's functioning off of how much profit you're making per door. Okay. So if you're making $200 per door, so that's apartment unit, right? So 10 units, you're making $200 per unit, and there's 10, so you're making $2,000 a month. That's your cash flow on that building. So now think about it. Remediation, it's not cheap, right? You come in and let's say, so the thing that happened in my place, water through the ceiling. We found out later after Mark came in that it actually had spread horizontally across the ceiling because that's what water does when it hits a horizontal surface. It goes sideways. And then it got to the walls and it actually went down the walls of the room. So all of the walls were all wet at the time that he came in. So they had already come in, fixed the ceiling, done all this. You can't see the wet, right? So he used moisture meters and things to kind of tell us what was going on in there. But what they really needed to do is they needed to come in and gut my entire room. That's what they needed to do because the water had penetrated all these places. They had to remove all the walls, all the ceiling, and do it. It was a single room. It's not like it was a whole house thing that impacted. It was a single room. But to do that, even with a franchise style remediation company that's not the best at what they do, but even someone like that's probably going to cost $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 or something to do that. Their entire profit on the building, all 10 units for the year, is $2,000 in that scenario.
Wow.
That means they've lost 2.5 years of profit on that building. Do you think they're going to want to do that stuff?
Yeah.
No. And so you just have to understand where their head's at. And this is why they're not doing it. It costs money.
Yeah, it makes sense because when I was at my place, it's funny because Mark's whole report was very thorough that showed that I had not only black mold, but multiple species of mold in high levels. But then they bring in a quote unquote mold guy and they're like, no, it's good. It's not really a little bit, but it's probably from outside. I was like, how is this so different, these two reports?
Yeah.
And can you maybe speak to if the landlord does end up bringing a quote unquote mold guy, how their testing is different? Because I've had a lot of people on Instagram go, hey doc, my landlord brought a mold guy. He said everything's clear, but I still have symptoms.
Yeah. Here's what they're going to do. They're going to come in. They're going to take an air sample in the middle of a room. It's going to run for about 5 minutes. They might do that in 2 or 3 other rooms, and they're going to leave, and they're going to be at your house for maybe a half hour. This is what they do. The problem with taking an air sample in the middle of a room like that is it's literally the worst way to use that test. It's the least effective way to use that type of test. But in our minds, we rationalize it and we say, oh, it's the air you're breathing. It's an air quality test. This is the type of test that you use. I'm sure obviously in what you do, there are tests that you use for certain things and they have strengths and they have weaknesses. And you wouldn't use a test that isn't meant for one thing and then say, okay, well, that test that wasn't even meant for this says that everything is fine. And so we're going to run off of that, right? And that's kind of the thing. The problem is our whole industry thinks that you should use the test that way. So it's just this massive industry problem. But so when it comes to air samples, here's the difference. And I did this so I've known this. I know when you take air samples in the middle of the room, they miss things. So for a year on every inspection that I went on, I picked one spot in the house where I was pretty confident that there was going to be a source problem. So when I say source, I mean behind a wall, in a cabinet, in a ceiling, something like that. And then I would test that area using an air test, because that's really where they're great. They're great at getting behind a wall and showing you something you can't see. Like the closer you are to the source, the better an air test is. The further away from the source you get, it gets exponentially less effective.
Yeah.
And so what I did is for this year, I did this. I like to say there was a wall. So I do an air test behind a wall using an air pump. And then like literally 3-4 feet away, I set up an air sample pump the way that a normal person would do it.
Mm-hmm.
And 80% of the time, it was a false negative.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning that if you just took the air sample in the middle of the room, 8 out of 10 times it would give you a false read that everything was okay.
Damn.
And you go 3 feet over to the left and actually do the test in the wall where the problem is located, and there's a problem there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then the next question comes up, well, like, Brian, I mean, if the air test isn't picking it up, then is it really a problem?
Yeah.
Right? Is it trapped behind the wall? Maybe it's in the wall. Is it trapped behind the wall? It's not. And if you've ever opened a door somewhere and like a door somewhere else shuts by itself, like have you ever done that?
Yeah, for sure.
So it's air pressure. That's literally like invisible air currents that are moving so strongly through your house that they're slamming a door shut on the other side of the house.
Yeah.
That happens in your house all the time. It pulls stuff out from the walls. The challenge is that those air samples in that way, when you do them in the middle of a space like that, they're a snapshot in time. So you could take that air sample 5 times and get 5 different results, depending on what happens to be floating around during that time. And they're not really looking for the right thing. They're looking for spores, when the truth is the fragments that break off of the colonies and maybe the toxins that they create can be way more problematic than the spores. And they could be in such a higher magnitude than the spores too. The best way to really understand what's moving through your house is to do dust testing, like the ERMI test, which a lot of people who are in the mold world have heard of, but it's a dust collection that you send out and they analyze it, and it actually looks for all the components of a mold colony, not just the spores. Those other components are the ones that actually get way smaller and they could get through our nose and our throat into our lungs. They're generally more problematic in the first place. So it's just that's the test to use to see what you're exposed to. Whereas like the air sample test is a better use if you're trying to find like a hidden mold issue directly at a source.
Do you think that there's people who can get the ERMI test? Because I believe you could just buy that as any consumer, right?
Yeah.
Okay, let's say someone's listening, they suspect mold. Can they get the ERMI test, test some dust, and then it comes back as, okay, yeah, you might have some species of mold go in your home, and then call like a mold guy like you?
Yeah, 100%. You could definitely use it as a screening test.
Okay.
It doesn't, I think a lot of people try to use it differently because ERMI gets a lot of praise, which it should. The technology that's behind it is really the gold standard of how you are able to analyze mold, because it gets to the DNA level, you're understanding the fragment load, so more of the colony is getting accounted for. But again, it has its weaknesses, right? So the big thing out of this conversation is just for us to realize that there isn't one sample that is the sample that you do that tells you everything. It is great as a screening test. If you think about it, if you have multiple sources in the house and everything's kind of moving into the living space and it settles down on surfaces, then an ERMI sort of dust collection is going to show you the compilation of all the different things that have impacted that space.
Yeah.
It does not tell you where it's coming from. So what you said was like, can you use this as like a start to see, is there something happening here, and then go on from that? Totally. And I know a lot of people come to us because they've gone down that road.
Yeah, it's great because they're not super expensive for just as a screening test. So a lot of people can be encouraged to go, all right, like maybe I can start and look for mold in my place. And then, oh, wow, like it's here.
Yeah.
It's in high levels. I need someone to come in and find the source. And then the source needs to be remediated.
Yeah. And so the thing that I don't want people to get hung up on is, so sometimes people will do the ERMI, then they'll call a remediation company. They'll skip the step of where is it coming from, and they'll just go straight to the fact of there's mold floating around, I need to get it fixed. And a lot of remediation companies just think about what their business is. I always tell people, like, think about what the underlying motivation is behind anyone that you're talking to when you're evaluating what they're telling you, right? The remediation company, their job is to come in and do cleaning. That's their job. If you call them and you're like, hey, I've already tested, there's mold in my house, I need you to come clean it. Cool, we got this fog, it's this magic thing, it fixes everything, costs 10 grand, everything's gone. Like, don't do that, because if you do that, you might feel better for a couple of weeks, but then all the sources that are still in the house are going to start penetrating back in, and the cleaning that had happened is obviously not going to be as clean anymore, and over time the buildup's going to start, you'll be exposed again, you'll start all over again, but you'll be out like maybe 10 grand.
Wow. And that's a lot of these mold companies are working, right?
Yeah, a lot of the remediation companies, they all tout this. They have their own version of some magic enzyme that eats and kills everything, or this product that just destroys it all and there's never a problem. They tell you, oh, it gets behind the walls and it does all this stuff.
Mhm.
One, it doesn't. I just know that it doesn't because I've seen it over and over again. But then you just take a step back, like let's say it did. Let's say it got behind all the walls and it went through the whole house and it killed everything. Let's just say it killed everything. You know what it's not doing? It's not removing it though.
Mhm.
So even if it's dead, like, and this is such a big thing, like mold doesn't have to be actively growing. It doesn't have to be, quote, alive for it to impact us. The fragments, the spores that are left over, all that stuff that's still in the house is still getting caught up in the dust, still getting popped up in our breathing zones, and still impacts us. So even if this magic thing killed everything, which it doesn't, but even if it did, you take them at their word for it. If it's not removed, you're still being exposed. It's not going to do the trick.
Mm-hmm. So when you say removed, that means like opening up a wall and going, here's the source of the water damage, here's the damaged area. We need to remove that.
Yeah. So there's kind of two parts of source removal, of remediation. So on our end anyway, and this is kind of how we built this out. A lot of companies don't focus on the second piece. Actually, a lot of companies don't focus on one of them. Some companies will only focus on two, some will only focus on the first one. But the thing is, you have to think about it. I use this analogy all the time that mold's like a factory. So if you ever drive by a factory, they're making whatever they're making inside, smoke comes out of the top of the factory. It's not the factory that's directly impacting our air quality and the air pollution. It's the smoke that's actually the air pollution, but the factory's creating it, right? So it is the true source of what's going on. And so the first thing you have to do before you try to clean your air is you got to stop the factories from making more smoke. Otherwise, you're fighting this never-ending battle, right? So in the house, the factories are where the mold is actually growing, behind a wall, in a cabinet, in a ceiling, like wherever it might be. And a lot of times it means removal. You have to remove drywall because it's porous and it grows into it. So you can't surface clean drywall. You can't surface clean cabinets because the roots of the colonies grow into it. So you actually do have to remove all that stuff. You'll expose like the framing and the studs and stuff behind the walls, and then that stuff can be cleaned and it can be worked out that way. One of the bigger mistakes that I see a lot though is that remediators will remove, let's say, drywall out of a wall, but then they don't do anything for the framing components and they just leave them. The mold growth is still in those framing components, and then you put the wall back up and there's still mold behind the wall, and again you spent all this money and there's still mold back there and it still causes a problem. So the removal part is about removing the kind of like non-structural materials that have to go, and then also in some sort of abrasive cleaning method to be getting the growth out of the wood that was getting in there, sanding, wire brushing, some sort of way to get that stuff out of there. And that's the first piece of source removal. Then we go back to the analogy, you talk about the smoke that came out of the factory. So we shut the factory down, we bulldozed it, we fired everyone, it's no longer making smoke anymore. The smoke that came out to that point doesn't like magically suck back into the factory at that point. Right. It's not like, oh, the factory shut down. No, all the smoke's gonna come back. It's all out now. It's part of the world. It's part of what we're breathing. Same thing in our house. So if you only remediated the wall where the problem was and did nothing about cleaning your house, you're gonna walk into your house, you're still gonna be exposed to everything because it's still there. The second part of source removal is getting all the little particles and things that are floating around the house out of the house. That's the second part. It seems more complicated, but it's really not that difficult. It's just labor intensive, but the kind of key component is you got a bunch of stuff floating around. I can't just grab all of it because it's all over the place. You can't see it, right? So how do you get it? This is where a fogging component comes in. So the fogging is not the end all be all. The fogging is a tool in the pack of what you do in the process. The fogging connects to all the particles, that attaches to them, makes them heavier. Gravity brings them to the surface. Then you can wipe all the surfaces, and now you've removed the floating particle.
Makes sense.
So it's remove at both levels.
Wow. So two sources. And it just, the way you illustrate is that a lot of these conventional mold companies are just doing it halfway, or not, basically not doing both sources, and or just not getting to the root of cleaning up the source, like the foundation where a lot of the mold is growing.
Yeah. I mean, there's really only two reasons remediation doesn't work. You didn't find all the sources. So you go through and you think you cleaned everything, but there's still stuff you didn't get. That's the first thing. Or the second thing is they didn't actually remove it all properly. It's only two reasons. So the first reason is a really thorough inspection. So you got to make sure you're working with people that can go through like we do, like we talked about Mark did, and kind of saw these things. And the second piece is make sure that you're getting a remediation company that's going to do it the right way.
So you've been at this for a while. How, because, you know, in the literature, it's believed like 46 to 50% of homes have mold. I think that number may be a little different for you. In your experience, how do you see it?
Yeah. So anecdotally, I would probably tell you walking in, 90% of homes probably have some sort of water damage that have gone on. So the number that floats around is like 40-50% of homes have some sort of water damage. Like the EPA's put that out. I think
Yeah.
maybe OSHA's maybe put that out, but I definitely know the EPA has that stat out. Think about like what water damage is and what gets reported as water damage. Typically, like larger flood type things are kind of what gets reported
Mhm.
as water damage. But as we're talking through this, we realize that a leak under a sink is water damage. No one is reporting a leak under a sink to anyone that's tracking it, right?
Right.
So to understand that you have to take that into account. Every house I go into, there's always something. Like 90% might even be low. There's always something that's going on. And then we have internal data where we went back recently over the last 200 source direct samples that we did. So if we think there's something hiding behind this wall, that's what's considered a source sample.
Hmm.
No current moisture, no current water, literally just cracking or peeling or bubbling or some of these clues that we look for. 8 out of every 10 of those has mold behind it from what
Wow.
we've seen. So you now look, you say, okay, basically every house that you go into has some form of water damage somewhere. And then we know that about 8 out of every 10 of those areas is going to have a problem, which then means that pretty much most houses have some sort of problem in them. Is it a problem for everyone? Not necessarily. You know, if you're able to detox and you don't have a super heavy load of other toxins that are filling up your immune system and all that stuff, then maybe it's not impacting you. But there's such a large percentage of the population that is impacted by that,
Hmm.
and a big chunk of that set that doesn't even know that that's what's impacting them,
Right.
and it's tough.
That's what I bring to the surface about mold, is that a lot of us go to the doctor and they can't find what's going on with us because we have these just like multi-systemic weird symptoms that don't make sense in the literature. No one thinks about, let's check you for mold, or let's even check you for what's your home where you spend the most time or work. And this is why, so I tell people, if nothing, you can't find anything, check for mold,
Yeah.
right? Because the way mold presents is multisystemic. And you don't have to always have cognitive symptoms. A lot of people do, like me and you, but it's pretty wild to think that. And then, as you said, chronic diseases, all of a sudden how affected we are goes up and up and up and up. And it's just it's so fascinating to me because
Yeah.
it's huge. And like you said, 90% of homes, more or less.
Have something going on in
Yeah.
terms of water damage. And you're right. And I did this presentation last year, the IEQA, which is our industry's biggest annual event. So we came in and I did a presentation for remediation for hypersensitive people. Because in general, our industry just doesn't get it in general. There's like a handful of people, and honestly, I'm related to most of them,
Right.
that understand how to go through and do it. And so I was trying to like figure out exactly what you were saying, like this number of people that are impacted. It's pretty like mind blowing once you actually see it in a way that makes sense. Like, all right, how can I make these guys understand that it's not like the one crazy client that they have that they think is a pain in the ass, but there's a lot of people that are impacted by this. So I went and I just pulled like 4 of the kind of larger health conditions that I have seen just in my own clients that have a mold related component to it, right? One was Lyme disease. One is general autoimmune disorders. One was PANS and PANDAS, which is pediatric neurological issues. And then the other was CIRS, which is chronic inflammatory response syndrome. So I just took those 4. I went up and looked at the numbers. I literally just went and found how many people are diagnosed with this stuff. It's probably even underreported, honestly. And I look, and that's over 40% of the US population in its entirety have one of those 4 things going on. It was like 130 million people or something.
Yeah.
And so you think about that. And that's not even everything. That's just a few of them. Most people, I bet you, if you look, you're over 50% of people, once you add all the other things that could be contributors, that are impacted by this stuff. And most of them just have no idea.
Yeah. And many of the root causes could be just the home environment, the mold exposure. It's pretty wild to hear. And I love that you're doing what you're doing, getting into homes, educating with your show. What's the name of your podcast?
Mold Finders Radio.
Mold Finder. So listen, you don't have to have mold. It's fascinating as it is, but if you do suspect mold, this is a place to be. You give out all the information, what to look for in the home, like sources. Like this is all important things that we need to be educated with. I mean, I talk about empowerment over your health, like working out and eating, but like, what about empowerment over your home? you know?
It's so connected. And it's funny because a lot of the stuff that you talk about, I've been telling you, like I listen to your stuff, I love your show. And people who are dealing with mold issues, and even if it's not mold issues, even if you're dealing with some of these other chronic health issues, the stuff you do to support your body and the healing process and like what's getting kind of turned off and like diminished because you're exposed to stuff like this, so dealing with your mitochondria health and like all these things, it's so important to that. It's not just one or the other, right? It really needs to be like a holistic connection between the two, like everything that you're helping people with and understand like how your body works. Also the stuff you're putting into your body, all the review stuff that you do is like super informative, right? Because I feel like people don't have time to do that. They don't even know what to look for when they are doing that, right? So to have a resource for that's amazing. You tie that stuff on how to kind of create a foundation in your body that can help you heal, and then understand how to get an environment that's not going to overload that. That's like the combination that helps.
The resiliency, having that resiliency. So how do people find you? Do you have a website? I know your Instagram, but let's talk about that too, just so people can get to you if they need you.
Yeah, so my company's called We Inspect. Our website is yesweinspect.com. And I, for the last 6 months, have been doing this webinar every week where it's basically how to find the hidden mold in your house was this webinar I was doing. I was doing it live. It just became too much for me to do live over and over and over again. So we recorded one and we automated it. It's like on demand now. So if you go to moldfindersmethod.com, it's literally a free webinar of how you can go through and find mold in your home. And then there's actually like a training program we created that you literally could just follow the steps. You go into a room, you look where I tell you to look, you look for what I tell you to look for. And if it looks like that, it's a problem. So there's a program that's available as part of that people can enroll in if they're concerned about their own home too.
Cool. And does the program have a name?
It's called Mold Finders Method.
Mold Finders Method. Okay, so people can, anyone viewing, listening, if you have if you suspect, because do you treat the whole country or are you just in this area?
No, we are nationwide.
Nationwide. Okay, so that now people have access to somebody if they find something through through the method. Amazing stuff. You built an awesome company. I'm such a fan of what you do. Awesome life purpose, dude. And thank you for coming. It's a pleasure to have you here. I love conversations about environmental medicine, environmental toxins, especially mold.
Awesome. Thank you so much, man. It's like I said, it's been on my bucket list to be on this, to be a guest. So I'm super excited. Thank you.
And you dropped the gems. I appreciate it, man.
Appreciate it, man.
All right, an amazing, amazing show. I mean, Brian is the man when it comes to mold. He knows everything inside out, what to look for. I would urge you all to follow him. And if you do worry about mold in the home, and it's a likely chance that there is some water damage in the home percentage-wise, then I would urge you to just follow his page. Look to what he's doing and what to look for so you can assure that for yourself. Please remember to rate, review, subscribe, support the show. I can't wait to do this next week. Love you all.